All right, and we're back with another episode of Black Life Amplified. It is the virtual town hall series hosted by the African American Leadership Forum. My name is Brittany L. Wright with Insight News, and I'll be your host for today's conversation. Before we get started, I want to give a very special thank you to all of our sponsors, partners, and producers who make this town hall possible. So, up first, our sponsors, the Minneapolis Foundation, North Point Health and Wellness, Children's Minnesota, 3M, US Bank, and Target are all coming together to make this particular town hall possible. And I also want to say a very special thank you to our partners, our community partners, which include North Point, Children's Minnesota, Insight News, the Spokesman Recorder, Minnesota Community Care as well. So thank you to everyone who makes this town hall possible and to all of you who are watching from home. Today's virtual town hall is focused on COVID-19 and leadership by any means necessary. There is a virtual conference that's happening February 25th through the 27th, so just a little over a week away, and that's going to be hosted by the African American Leadership Forum. Tickets for the conference are now on sale at aalftc.org. It's the African American Leadership Forum's website, and the tickets, again, are on sale. It doesn't matter where you are in the world, the conference is happening virtually, and so we encourage you all to join us and be a part of it. And to learn more about the conference, stay tuned because we'll talk about that in just a little bit. The name of the conference is Leadership by Any Means Necessary. And we're going to talk about what that means, what you can expect from the conference, and how to lead through adversity, challenging situations, and how to push through. It is our ancestral knowledge, ancestral power that continues to push us, especially as Black people, to move forward, especially during these trying times. We are in the middle of a global pandemic here in the Twin Cities. We're at the epicenter of a social uprising, not to mention what we go through in our personal lives and the challenges that we face in the workplace. So, needless to say, it is not an easy time. And yet our leadership continues anyway. But before we fully get into that conversation, we have to continue our work in COVID because we are in a global pandemic and our people are disproportionately impacted. Adrienne Thornton, who is a nurse and infection preventionist, she couldn't be here today, but she did send us a little video. We were able to do an interview earlier. And so we're going to cut to that clip of Adrienne and I discussing what's happening with COVID. And then we'll jump in with our amazing panelists talking about leadership by any means necessary. Producers, go ahead and roll the clip.
I'm good. How are you, Brittany?
I'm good. It's different. This is a different setup that we have here. I like it.
I like it though. It gives us options, and I like having options. So
that's important, especially in this virtual world. And so we are making the most of still being in a pandemic, and real life is happening, right? And so you're going to be traveling by the time this airs, and we want to send you and your family safe travels and lots of love. I know you're not traveling on the happiest of circumstances, but we're glad that you can still be with us today to get this recorded, and just really appreciate your commitment, because I know you're doing a thousand other things. So you said today was a very busy day. You were in the COVID lab. What does that mean?
Well, actually, I was in the COVID vaccine clinic. We vaccinated about 140 people today. And we're also implementing a new system for registering and scheduling people and tracking them so that we can eventually get to the point where we vaccinate more people. And so I'm also training people on how to use that new system. So it's just been a hoot, a holler, and a lot of fun. Tiring, but fun.
So, okay, but that sounds like good news, though. At least 100 more people in the state have been vaccinated. And you know that for sure because you were a part of making sure that they get their vaccinations. And so with these vaccinations rolling out, do you anticipate there being a decrease, not just with your clinic, but overall within the state? Do you anticipate that there will be a decrease in COVID cases as a result of more people getting vaccinated?
You know, we should eventually start to see the numbers go down due to the vaccine. Right now, the numbers are going down, and we can't say 100% that it's due to vaccination rates because we're still giving people their second vaccination. And in order to be fully vaccinated, you do need 2 full doses of either the Pfizer or the Moderna vaccine. So we haven't reached that point yet where we have enough people in the state vaccinated to consider us to have herd immunity. But I think it's very promising. The numbers of COVID cases, the number of COVID deaths and hospitalizations have all drastically dropped. And I think that can be attributed to several things. We're past the holiday season and it's really cold outside. So people are staying in. People aren't going out as much. They're not gathering as often. And, I think too, people are more aware of the importance of wearing a mask and doing social distance. I think with the new administration really being clear about the directives that they're giving, that has helped the nation kind of steer towards doing more of the right thing more all the time. So I think all of that has an impact on the fact that we're seeing lower numbers, and that's a good thing. What we want is for the numbers to continue to go down. And so we don't want people to get comfortable with the current state and say, oh, well, there's less COVID, so we can get together more, or, oh, somebody's vaccinated, so let's get together and take our mask off, because if everyone in the group isn't vaccinated, there's still that risk of transmission occurring at some point. So, we don't want people to let their guards down just yet. Our children are not being vaccinated. Right now, the bulk of the people are 65 and older, or healthcare workers or educators. And so while we're vaccinating in great numbers, we still have a long way to go before we get to the point where we can just take a deep breath and just relax a little bit more. So people should still have a heightened awareness.
Okay. Do you recommend, if you do want to see your loved ones or get out of the house or travel, that people are getting tested like on a regular basis, or should it be still only get tested if you've been exposed and have symptoms?
The good thing about testing is it lets you know what's going on at that moment in time. The bad thing about testing is it only lets you know what's going on at that moment in time. And so we've seen people test negative on Monday and get retested on Wednesday and test positive. So I don't think testing is a bad thing as long as you understand the limitations of the testing. And so, I would say if you want to be with your family, getting tested is fine. But if you don't live together, then you need to quarantine. And so, like, for instance, when I went to Florida, my kids and I quarantined in the house for 14 days before we went down there. And we still weren't really with family. It was just my one sister and her daughter. But she also quarantined for 14 days before she came down there because we were staying in the same condo together. And then if we left, we wore a mask. My oldest sister was there. She wasn't able to quarantine because of her job. And so we wore masks and or social distance from her when we were around her. And so you just have to make really good, sound decisions based on the guidance. The guidance is there to kind of steer you in the right direction, but your people are going to have to make good decisions based on the guidance for their own situation. And so, if you want to travel, the CDC recommends against it because of the new variants that are out, and they really don't want to see that transmitting more. But of course, they have no authority over people. And so if you are going to travel anyway, then make sure you continue to do what you need to do in terms of wearing your mask, keeping your social distance, and doing your hand hygiene. And not traveling and going to the beach where there are hundreds and thousands of people on the beach and you're right in the middle of it without a mask on. That is not what people should be doing. You should not be going into restaurants and bars that are crowded with people who are not wearing their mask and not social distancing. So the same guidelines that we've been doing, and recommending all along, those still stand. The biggest difference now is that the CDC really recommends against traveling, and especially international travel. I know a lot of people are trying to go to Mexico and Jamaica because they're
Mexico
tired.
Flights are cheap.
They are so cheap, and everyone wants to go, and that's wonderful.
Yeah.
but the CDC recommends against it. And if you do international travel, you are required to get tested to travel. So you have to get tested 3 days before you leave, and then you have to have a negative test 3 days before you come back. And that's a requirement. If you're traveling domestically, it varies from state to state, and so you really need to check with each state to see what they're doing, what their requirements are.
Well, what about rapid testing? Because I've been seeing like some people say, oh, I get rapid tested for work, so I know right away whether or not, I have it. Is that like available to everyone, or is that kind of dependent on the industry that you work in?
Yeah, it's dependent on where you work and what type of test they have. Every organization doesn't have the same test, and the rapid test is good. It's great if you have it, but a lot of places don't have it. And so you do have to wait 3 or 4 days before you get the results back. So it's important that you check with the testing site that you're going to go to confirm what their turnaround time is for getting their tests back, because they may have the test that takes 7 days to get the results back. You can't just assume that everyone has the same test.
Got it. Okay. Well, we are still in it. I know for me, I'm getting, I don't want to say I'm getting stir crazy, but I miss my friends, I miss my extended family. And so, I don't know, is quarantining the only answer? I'm even wondering about families who are co-parenting and shuffling kids back and forth. Like what is the solution to being able to make sure we see our loved ones and stay safe? Is there anything evolved that's different?
Nope, nothing's different. If you get together with your family, you need to social distance for sure. If you can't social distance, you should have on your mask. And really, you should wear your mask all the time. But, if you're getting together with your family and you're eating, well, you can't wear a mask while you eat. I mean, that's just unrealistic. But if you're able to socially distance from them, and you can be creative with it, get some, what do you call those little tables, the little...
Like the TV trays?
Yeah, the little TV trays, buy a bunch of those and just spread people out around the room, 6 feet apart in a circle. And then you can all sit there, eat dinner together, and still maintain your social distance. So there are ways to do it. You just have to be creative about it. We can't go outside right now because it's Minnesota. Although if I could find a tent with a great heater and an open window, I would probably try it. But, we're going to have to be indoors right now. So you have to get really creative with how you do that. And, just keeping your social distance, making sure you're doing your hand hygiene. I know people are sick of hearing wear your mask, but these 3 things have been proven over and over again to be successful at stopping the transmission, even when there was COVID in the presence of a group of people.
Okay. And speaking of cold weather, there is this crazy storm that's moving across the country right now. Folks in like Texas are experiencing sub-zero temps and a lot of like ice and freezing rain. People are losing their heat and their power is going out. Do you anticipate, just with the storm and kind of how especially our friends and our family down south are able to respond to it, or the lack of response, I should say, by those state governments and infrastructure? Do you anticipate that this could make the pandemic worse and more people would get sick?
There's that possibility. I know that I heard on the news this morning that, and I can't remember if it was in Dallas or Austin or where it was, but they were moving people to the convention center for their safety. And so in situations like that, if they can do that and maintain distance and hygiene, that's great. But historically, we know that those places get crowded very quickly. Maintaining hygiene is very difficult in those situations. And if you're going to have an outbreak, that is the type of situation that is a breeding ground for an outbreak to occur. So we may see more transmission in those areas. I don't think the storm itself will cause, the transmission rate to go up. People are most likely staying home more because of the storm. They can't get out the house, they can't drive. And so they're going to be staying home more unless they're going to these congregate settings to stay because they don't have heat and electricity and water. So it really is very dependent on the situation that will determine how the storm impacts the pandemic.
Got it. Well, my little one is telling me that it's just about time for us to wrap up, but you
Yes.
bring up these large facilities, and the Super Bowl just happened. And that was kind of my question is, I know they had frontline workers there, but maybe all of those people were vaccinated, but I'm just kind of wondering, as we see these larger gatherings happening, especially during sports, like, is that going to possibly contribute to another spike in numbers?
It really depends. If you were watching the game, you could see that they did a really good job of social distancing people. And so they were kind of in pods. So, if it was you and your family, that was one pod, and you had an entire row to yourself. And then there were several rows between you and other people. And so I think for the Super Bowl, they did a fabulous job of trying to maintain the standards in the face of, this is the biggest event of the year for the US. This is like apple pie and ice cream for us. And so I think they did a really good job of making sure that the measures that the CDC recommends were in place. It looked to me as though people were following the recommendations and the guidelines. I can't say for sure, but we'll know in about 3 or 4 weeks if it had an impact, because usually when you have a super spreader event, within the next 3 to 4 weeks, you start to see an increase in the rates of COVID. So, and those people that were attending the Super Bowl were from different places around the country. So it'll be interesting to see if that impacts other states, or if there are just pockets of transmission related to that. We don't know, but we'll find out in the next few weeks.
Well, I just feel like if they can, have a stadium full of people at some level for the Super Bowl, then Beyonce can go back on tour. And I can be one of those people. I volunteer myself as a tribute. So,
right.
Adrienne, thank you for your time and for just all of your diligence in helping, critical work happen in the state around COVID and navigating the pandemic. Safe travels to you and your family. We send our deepest condolences. This is an example of leadership by any means necessary. You taking the time to do this, even in this moment. And we're going to go ahead and get back to our other panelists so that we can continue talking about the upcoming conference by ALF. And then I'll see you next week, because we're going back to back again.
Yes.
So the work doesn't stop. So I'll see you soon. Take care.
All right. Have a good one.
You too. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye.
That was Adrienne Thornton from Children's Minnesota. She is a nurse and infection preventionist focusing on all things COVID-19 on our virtual town hall. Adrienne couldn't be here, and so that was a pre-recorded interview. But as you can see, when it comes to working to prevent the spread of COVID-19, it's an around-the-clock job. And so, Adrienne, again, we thank you for your diligence, and you have our deepest condolences and love. Safe travels, and we will see you back next week. Now, as I mentioned, we're talking on today's town hall about leadership by any means necessary. And so, here to continue talking about what does it mean to lead by any means necessary, I have a panel of incredibly talented leaders within the Twin Cities and from around the country. Joining us is Dr. Narita Hughes, who is the Dean of Business Technology, Career, and Workforce Development. Welcome back to the Town Hall. We have Dr. Sylvia Bartley, who is a Senior Global Director at the Medtronic Foundation. Welcome, Dr. Bartley. And joining us is ALF's own Mr. Ernest Comer, who is an Associate Director at the African American Leadership Forum. And then joining us in just a little bit will be Angela Rose Myers, who is the President of the Minneapolis chapter of the NAACP. So welcome, panelists. Thank you so much for being here on this special edition of Black Life Amplified. We're talking about the upcoming conference happening the 25th through the 27th, so just in about a week. And I want to ask you all, what does it mean to lead by any means necessary? Tell us about a time that you've had to lead by any means necessary, and to give us some context, tell us about who you are and what your leadership looks like. I know that's a lot, so I will repeat it, but I'll just share to give you all a time to ground and think. For me, when I think about leadership by any means necessary, I think about pushing through and facing adversity and really moving forward. Even in preparation for this town hall, sometimes I think as leaders, what makes someone a leader is being able to trust their intuition, right? And to know when they're doing something that's right, knowing the difference between right and wrong. Well, typically on Wednesday mornings, I have therapy. And something in my spirit told me yesterday, move your appointment, move it from Wednesday to Friday, and take a little bit of extra time for this particular town hall. And I'm sharing that because as I was preparing, drafting the agenda this morning so that we could all have questions and get everything ready, I got a phone call. I got a phone call from a loved one who was having a mental health episode. And they were not in a good place and were actually planning on taking their life. And it was I will spare you the details, but a scary situation to be seeing on FaceTime in real time. And I ended up having to call 911 and send an ambulance to their address and get their home. And I could have very easily canceled and said, okay, I can't do the town hall because craziness is happening. But I chose to push forward once we diffused the situation and got this person help, because this is the work. For me, the reason why I come to this town hall, the reason why I work with ALF, the reason why I'm so excited about this conference is because there are some phenomenal leaders who have chosen to share their knowledge and their resources to bring forward healing, inspiration, motivation, and to show that despite the things that they have experienced in their personal life or that they may be currently experiencing in real time, you just heard we're in the middle of a pandemic and it doesn't seem to be going anywhere. They found a way to push forward and to find purpose, even in the midst of their pain, and to turn that into power. And so for me, that's what leadership by any means necessary means. Now, was I flustered? Yes. Do I still feel flustered? A little bit, but that's okay. I am so excited to have all of you here, and I'm so honored to be able to do what I do and to share this space with you all, because you're impressive. You're impressive human beings, and you're doing work that literally is changing people's lives. So I'm sharing that to stall and to give you guys some time, because that's a loaded question, but also to remind people to just be kind, to be gracious. You have no idea what people are holding and what they're going through. You have no idea what a little bit of kindness or a quick affirmation or compliment or acknowledgement of someone, what it could mean in someone's day. And it really does make a difference to just show up as a leader, regardless of whether it's in our personal life or our professional life, and to say, I'm going to choose to be the light today. I'm going to choose to be the light in someone else's life. So here to be a light on today's town hall. Again, we have Dr. Bartley, Dr. Hughes, and Mr. Ernest Comer. Please start, each one of you, by telling us a little bit about who you are and what you do, and then what leadership means by any means necessary means to you. So we'll first start with Dr. Bartley. Are you there?
I am here. And first of all, Brittany, thank you for sharing your story about this morning. I can only imagine that was tough, and I empathize because I too live with depression, so I can appreciate the dark days and what that means. And so when you were sharing your story, it really touched me. And I'm just so grateful that your family member had you to call and you to provide her or him with the support that they need. And I really hope that they are receiving the help that they deserve to get and are recovering well. And Brittany, you provided us with the questions before, and I was thinking about a perfect answer to give you to this question about what does leadership mean to us. And I'm just going to change it around completely and just speak from my heart, taking on from what you just said, because I am a person who works for corporate America. I've been in corporate for over 20 years. Started off in the UK, worked for Medtronic in the UK, had a European role, lived in Switzerland for 3.5 years, kind of oversaw this therapy, deep brain stimulation procedure side, making sure it was patient centric, and then relocated again to the United States and took on the global role of upstream, downstream marketing for this very special therapy that alleviates the symptoms of movement disorders. Then I transitioned over the last 3 years into the foundation and working to really oversee our employee engagement for 90,000 employees worldwide in how we can give back to our communities where we live, work, and where we play. And our focus and our mission is really centered around underserved communities worldwide. And it's a really good, fulfilling role. I also oversee how we respond to our natural disasters for Medtronic and the foundation, together with creating programs for patients who are living with chronic illnesses, so they too can use their extra life to give back to their communities. And I say all of that because it really is around, for me and my values, giving back to communities, particularly underserved communities that don't have access to healthcare or education or housing or those basic needs that we have for human rights. So my work is very much a job of compassion and humanity. And that really aligns with who I am as a person, because that's just my work. My work doesn't define me, but I've been very mindful, particularly in my last 15 years, in making sure that my values and my core beliefs just show up in every aspect of my life. And my core values is around compassion, humanities, and serving underserved communities kind of selflessly. And so giving back to my community is a big part of who I am. And outside of Medtronic, I equally spend as much time as I possibly can to give back to the Black community, primarily in the Twin Cities, where I lived for 9 years and I love dearly. I'm now in Atlanta, and I'm trying to get my feet in Atlanta in the midst of pandemic as much as I can to give back. So I've been part of ALF for the last 9 to 10 years. I've been on their board, I've co-chaired their education work group, and all of that work, again, is around giving back to our Black community to make sure that they have what they need to get basic education and healthcare and access and opportunities. Now, underneath all of that may sound great, but underneath all of that is a person that lives with depression, and that is me. And that depression shows up when you don't want it to show up, right? And it can really take a hold of you and make you question a lot of things, like, why am I here? What is my path? What is my purpose? I don't fit into this world, and how can I make a difference in a world that is, if I could just say, terrible to Black people, whether you're living in America or England or in a continent of Africa. My passion is all with the Black community, because if we fix it for the Black community, then we fix it for everybody. And being vulnerable is a part of leadership. And saying that I have depression, working for corporate America as a senior leader, that's not something people do often. But and it took me a long time to say those words out loud. And so leading by any means necessary means to me to really just be authentic in who I am, bring my whole self to work, to really identify what my core values are, which for me is community and serving my Black community and trying to eliminate the racial disparities that plagues our community. And then just showing everybody that just because I have a job in corporate and it looks like that I am all together, then maybe I am not, because I do have depression, which I'm managing now very well. But talking about it was the first step towards my self-healing and really being on the path to healing myself emotionally, so I can show up better for my community and do more. And if I achieved all of what I achieved, masking and hiding and suppressing my depression, can you imagine what I can achieve when I am fully whole and kind of addressing my well-being and feeling really good about it. So right now, I'm feeling super. I'm taking extreme measures to manage my depression, and I feel so much better, and I feel that I have more energy to do more for my community. So again, I think leadership by any means necessary can take many different shapes and sizes. And the vulnerability is a big part of that, because only when you're vulnerable can you let other people know that, I have the same condition, but I know I can overcome it. I know I can still be successful. I know it should not define and shape who I am. I know I shouldn't have to hide it or suppress it. It's a part of me, but if I manage it appropriately, I can do so much better in the world. And so I will stop there, but I do think that vulnerability part is key. And I took that track because of how you opened. And yeah, I just want to thank you for being vulnerable and allowing me to have the space to share this part of my story.
Well, I thank you as well. And I did feel like it was important to share because I don't think it was a coincidence that things happened in the timing that they did. Like I said, I wouldn't have even taken the call had I been in my own therapy session. But something told me last night, just move it to Friday and stop having them on Wednesdays. And so by just choosing to be obedient and then choosing to be vulnerable in this moment, it's just, I think it's what's necessary. And we're all facing something, you know. I too have struggled with depression and anxiety and am now managing quite well also, and also feel very energized. But there have been plenty of moments when I didn't. And I so appreciate you sharing, because I think it's important for people to know, one, leadership looks a lot of different ways. You know, I think sometimes people have the misconception that in order for you to be showing up for the Black community, you have to be grassroots community organizing, fist up activist, you know, boots on the ground. But there are many ways to serve, even in corporate settings, even at a very high level. And you can do so with excellence. And you can still have limitations or challenges that you face personally and things that happen behind closed doors that maybe people don't see. And so I hope this encourages someone else out there who may be feeling like, oh, well, I'm not qualified, or I could never do what Dr. Bartley does. And because of, you know, my mental health. And it's like, no, it's because of your mental health. You know, I actually had someone tell me, because of another health challenge that I have, someone said, it's actually your superpower. What you think is your deficit is actually your superpower, because you're able to push through it and move towards your goal in spite of it. And what you're doing by being open and by being vulnerable and by choosing to heal is giving someone else the courage. You're being the bridge to someone else's healing and wellness. So thank you for your courage and for your vulnerability. I want to go to our next panelist, Dr. Hughes. Are you there? Please tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and what's leadership by any means necessary mean to you.
So I'm here. Hopefully you can hear me okay. So yes. First and foremost, thank you again for allowing us this platform to kind of share our stories. So again, my long-winded title, I am the Dean of Business Technology, Career and Workforce Development at North Hennepin Community College. But I also wear a couple of other hats outside of that. I am the co-chair for ELF, and then I'm also the chair for the Council of Minnesotans for African Heritage. And so when you look at, you know, some of the positions that I've held in the past, even looking at my current position at the college, I would say I'm always looking at how do we help our, you know, our people of color, more specifically our Black and brown folks. And so we serve almost 50% student population is of color in my institution. And on top of that, the institution's been around since 1966, first Black dean that was hired, and that was in 2018. So leadership by any means necessary means sometimes you have to lead when you're the only one. Sometimes you have to lead when it's uncomfortable. And I appreciate, you know, the story that you shared. I also appreciate the story that Dr. Bartley had shared. And it's interesting because, you know, we kind of had like sidebar conversation before we went live. And I was like, I think I'm going to talk about this. And then, you know, when you opened up, Brittany, and then when Dr. Bartley said, and I was like, man, I said, something is telling me folks need to know, although we may hold these, you know, positions, there's internal things that we're dealing with. About a month ago, I was recently diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. And so when my doctor even said that to me, and I'm looking at him crazy, like, but I don't really, you know, I don't eat a lot of sugar. Because we jumped to that. And so it really was not necessarily about that. We know it's hereditary. We know there's other factors, you know, that are in part of that. But one of the things that I've had to learn to do most recently is, you know, change my diet, started working out more. But then also you're still trying to run an organization. You're still trying to lead in other aspects, you know, despite how you feel internally. And it's that vulnerability. You know, I have this word that I use with my team is grace and resilience. And I'm asking that of them because you're dealing with students that this is a new reality for them. And so some of them are trying to, you know, balance the virtual learning aspect for them, but then also the distance learning for their kids. And so I'm like, you have to give yourself grace. So when I look at leading by any means necessary, there's several factors into that. One of the things that I would say that you have to push through, you have to know your purpose first and foremost. And so I think if you know your purpose and you're passionate about your purpose, then you will lead at all costs. And not all costs meaning that it's going to be detrimental for you, that it's going to be at risk for you, or that it's going to be, you know, from a violence perspective, nothing like that. But you find a way to move forward. I look at this time last year, I was towards the end of basically completing my doctoral degree. I completed my degree and defended during a pandemic. And did I have everything else going on? I'm trying to navigate this new reality. And by golly, I still have to get this degree done. And so when I look at leadership and look at, you know, what does it mean by any means necessary? It means sometimes you have to push through in order to gain something better. And so I look at my journey that I have gone along. And then I also look at, you know, any and everything that I've done. I always try to uplift Black folks, uplift sisters, uplift brothers. Sometimes we can be so divided that people never know that we're all in one accord because of just how we treat each other. And I think that is also, you know, something that when you look at leadership is you lead by example. And so making sure that if you're doing something, know that there are several people that are watching you. We do a lot of posting on Facebook, and I know I post here and there, but it's interesting as I share my journey, my educational journey on Facebook, and I just shared this with a couple of women a couple of days ago, and I really did not know who really watches what I say on there. And so it's also leading, knowing that you have people watching you and you don't even know it. And so they're also watching your journey, but they're also celebrating, but then some are not celebrating you. And so when you have to lead by any means necessary, you have to lead in spite of the fact that somebody may not want to see you successful, or in spite of the fact that somebody wants to see you successful. And to me, that's really what it means. You really have to lead at all costs. And I'm going to stop right there.
I love it. That was an absolute word. You never know who's watching. You never know who's watching. You never know who's rooting for you, who's in your corner, who's mentioning your name when you're not inside the room on your behalf, and who might be mentioning your name in maybe a way that you wouldn't like your name to be mentioned. And regardless of whatever truth may be happening at that moment, you have to keep going. So we definitely want to wish you a congratulations on defending and completing your thesis. But also thank you just for sharing and for your vulnerability and being able to push through, because it's real. You know, you see the powerhouse on the outside, and what people can't see is the diagnosis that happens in the doctor's office, because Facebook isn't there, the cameras aren't rolling there, no one's typically Instagramming those challenging moments, and yet and still you show up the next day and you do what you got to do. And that definitely is what it means to lead. I want to pivot now to Mr. Ernest Comer. Ernest, please tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and what it means to lead by any means necessary.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. It's first of all, I feel like I was set up, Brittany. You know, I'm not gonna lie. I feel like you said to yourself, I'm gonna put these incredibly dynamic people on the screen first, and then I'm gonna have Ernest get on here, and we're gonna see what he has to say.
No,
You
no,
know what?
no,
I
not at all,
appreciate
my
it though.
brother.
I appreciate just sharing the space with you all. This is incredible, man. And I didn't expect to be taken to church today, but here we are. Um,
Won't he do it?
won't he do it? Okay, so first of all, I'm Ernest Coleman III. I'm the Associate Director for the African American Leadership Forum, and I am the lead or the coordinator for the Leadership by Any Means Necessary conference. We're going to be exploring collectivism, innovation, and activation. I cannot wait for this incredible event to come. Um, and when I think about the idea of leading by any means necessary, and I talked about this with the group before we got started. I talked about it on social media. Um, the challenge that we have, I think, across the board is this idea of first seeing ourselves as leaders. You know, even for folks who have the fancy job titles, you get the opportunities to take on a leadership role or position in your career. And we forget that before we stepped into those roles, we were already leaders. In fact, for a lot of us, that's why we were hired in the first place. Right. And so when we say leading by any means necessary, it's not necessarily about the role that you have in the company that decided to invest in your leadership for their business, but it's about how you lead in the space that you occupy. Right. And so for me, as a father, I recognize that when I became a dad, I got two babies. Okay. My baby, they a little older now. That's all right, though. My son, Tristan, my daughter, Harper. My son was born. I first looked in his eyes. Okay. And for the dads out there, you know what I'm talking about. I looked in my son's eyes and I saw a reflection of myself. It freaked me out. Very strange, out of body experience. When my daughter was born, very different experience, hard to explain, but I looked in her eyes and I saw like the galaxy. Okay. Now it was a very again an out of body experience, but those moments stuck with me and those moments resonated with me. And you know, since I've been carrying the not the weight, but the responsibility, the pride of fatherhood. I've carried the mantle of fatherhood, what have you. But it forced me to recognize the value that fathers bring to families, that fathers bring to community. And it forced me to recognize my responsibility to lead the charge in making sure that, you know, as fathers throughout our community, we create spaces to come together, acknowledge the challenges that we face, and acknowledge the leadership that we display in our day-to-day lives, appreciate one another, share the stories that we have. There's so much weight and there's so much value in the stories that we share. And I wish people could see the brilliance that I see in all of us throughout our community. I wish people could see the value that I see when I look at the people who are participating in this conference, when I look at the people who are engaged with the leadership network of the African American Leadership Forum. And just so that's the reason that I feel forced, I feel led to put on display the brilliance of our community. I feel forced to put on display the quality of people that exist throughout our network. It's so important to me, and I think it's so important to our community to see ourselves as leaders, and not just in the workplace, but in our personal lives, in our community, and how much value that holds to create impact for the future, right? Not for the people, not for the businesses or the system, for the future, big picture. So, you know, leading by any means necessary means seeing where you fit and stepping into the responsibility to create, to bring your energy and your effort to the space that's going to have an impact in a truly, truly powerful way. That's leading by any means necessary.
Thank you for that. When you start mentioning your children and how that shifted for you, your perspective and seeing the galaxy in your daughter's eyes and seeing a mirror in your son, I completely resonate with that. And it's absolutely beautiful. It really is one of those things. Once you become a parent, your life is forever changed. And it truly is a way, regardless of what title you hold. It's a leadership role that is so honorable and so thankless, but so worth it nonetheless. So thank you for sharing that. I want to ask our next panelist, Angela, are you there? Angela Rose Myers is the president of the Minneapolis chapter of the NAACP. Welcome, Angela. Please share with us a little bit about who you are and what you do and what leadership by any means necessary means to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me here, Brittany. And thank you so much for extending this platform to me. So hello, everyone. My name is Angela Rose Myers. I am the president of the Minneapolis NAACP. And the Minneapolis branch is a volunteer membership-led organization that has been in Minneapolis since 1914. So the NAACP, standing for the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, has been in existence since 1909 and was started by Black trailblazers and leaders like Ida B. Wells and as well as W.E.B. Du Bois, and as well as a number of white allies. And so we've been we are one of the oldest and largest civil rights organizations in the nation, focused on sustaining the racial equality and equality of all peoples. So particularly centering the Black community. So one of the things that I guess I, as a daughter of this, granddaughter of the civil rights movement, now finding myself in this movement as well, thinking about what does leadership mean by any means necessary. We also have to think about what those means are, right? Right now, our means should also be creative. They should be new. They should be centered and rooted in the needs of our community. I think that the means or the methodologies that are historically or traditionally used within institutions, particularly in our government, they have historically disenfranchised us. Like we were never supposed to originally engage in our government. But now that we are, we need to really come up with ways where our government can really reflect our values of inclusivity and making sure that our government prioritizes, having people of color there and Black people there to raise our voices. And that for me means breaking down barriers. There's a lot of barriers, even when it comes to, voting, that like we need to break down so that our communities can have access to raising our voices. But that also means that on the outside, what can we as community leaders and as community members who do understand and who do focus so hard on what is going on in our local government, our state government, our federal government, what can we do to really bring in our community to make sure that they understand and that they are participating in our government, that they are engaging in our government? Not everybody knows that, the city council has public hearings on issues that you can call in, like not everybody knows that, there are arenas for us that are already made for us so that we can raise our voices, right? Like the public hearings, these parts of, calling and emailing or writing your representative, your local representatives, from your city council person to your state house representative to your senator, your congressperson. These are the ways that we can engage the people who represent us, and how community leaders, how we're doing it, is really not, we don't have a monopoly on engaging our, our local officials, and we shouldn't have a monopoly on it. So we do need to think about new means, new ways of creating avenues for our people, right? Of people who has been historically disenfranchised, of people where like there's been systemic barriers put in place so that we haven't been heard. So when we're at the table, we need to look around and ask, okay, how do we pull up more seats? I think that it's already established that when Black people are at the table, particularly Black women are at tables of power, we bring in, new seats, and we bring more seats to the table. But we need to actually analyze and think about how can we do this where it's, we're bringing in more people in new ways. So that's, one of the things that I'm thinking about when we're talking about leadership by any means necessary. It's not just the means of like the hyper capitalist costs, just like where we were talking about earlier. Doesn't really have to be to the detriment of a leader or the detriment of our community, where we're putting all of this energy in and we're not seeing any outcomes, right? We need to focus on new means, new methodologies of leadership so that everyone can have a say, so that it is shared, the responsibility is shared across our community, and that there's actually fewer barriers to access. There's fewer barriers to, these tables. And so, I think that to also do that, the leadership that we need in this moment requires authenticity. It requires us to be beholden to people, to community, and not really beholden to, these ideas of what's, one party's values or, one party's policies or another. We need to really be beholden to people. And so, that's something that for us right now, we need to center that people aspect and that loving our people aspect for when we're going forward for our future. So that's, that was everything from me, Brittany.
Yes, I absolutely love what you said about the leadership that we exhibit by any means. It doesn't have to be to the detriment of ourselves, our commitment to our liberation or to a particular organization or to our values or whatever it may be, doesn't have to be at the expense of us. Certainly we have to learn how to push through in times of adversity. But suffering and leadership certainly aren't synonymous, and that's definitely a myth that we should eradicate, especially within our communities. And we should normalize being able to do things with ease. And I think the work that each and every one of us do, and the intention behind this conference is to support people in making sure, especially members of our community, that we can do so with excellence and not have to go through some of the difficult things that the people before us went through, right? So speaking of that, I want to ask Dr. Bartley, what is the balance between leading by any means necessary and then knowing when to actually take a step back, when to take care of yourself, whether that's physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, etc.? How do you find that balance and determine when to push through and when to step back?
And that is an excellent question. And it's almost the $1 million question. So one of the things we do as a Black community is we are resilient. And that word within itself means that we push through these difficult challenges and we still succeed and we overcome. But the situation that we're staying in hasn't really changed. So we're constantly in this place of dealing with stress and overcoming challenges, whether it's microaggressions or macroaggressions, that constant impact that racism has on us physically and emotionally. Now, we're very good at pushing through it, and we're very good at still succeeding and overcoming those challenges. And then sometimes, and more typically, we wear that as a badge of honor. We will say, I'm Superwoman, I'm Superman, look at all these things that happened to me, but yet I overcame. And if we're thinking about leadership and if we're in an organization, whether it's a for-profit or a non-profit, we come to the table with lots of skills and experiences. And when we compare that to our white counterparts, it's almost double. And I'm sure everyone's heard the phrase, the black tax. You've got to be be better, and do more in order to get a job that is at the same level as your white counterpart that has half your experience and almost half your qualification. So that's the way we were brought up. And we were raised, and somebody said this really well. Ingrid Cochran said this. She said, we raise our children to fit into a racist society, right? We raise them to fit in, and we raise them not to get hurt and not to be killed, right? And so we teach them all of these tactics so we seem more innocuous and we can get on and we can be successful. But behind all of that is physiology and our emotions. And this constant stress, this toxic stress, has an impact not just on our emotional health, but on our physical health. At the cellular level as well, there's a phrase called weathering, and that phrase talks about how our cells, the acceleration of our cells, they die 7 years more on average if you compare that to cells of white women in similar situations. So basically our cells die quicker, they accelerate, and therefore we suffer from that physiologically. And emotionally, we all know that toxic stress has an impact on our physiology. It causes inflammation. That chronic inflammation leads to these chronic illnesses, and therefore we have a high prevalence of diabetes, obesity, hypertension, cancer, etc. Right? So all of that is the backstory to say we should stop and take care of ourselves. We should not be proud of being a superwoman or a superman. We should be proud to say, look, I need help. I can't do this all by myself. This is a lot you're expecting from me, and we should put boundaries on that in our personal lives. And yes, that means with our family too, together with our professional lives. And once we start doing that, will we really begin to look after ourselves, and as I mentioned earlier, have the energy, more energy, to show up and do the best we can for our communities and our families and our loved ones. And I'm a Peloton addict. That's part of my self-care during this pandemic. I'm on that Peloton all the time. And they had a series, the Year of Yes. And the phrase is, you need to learn to say no, so you have the ability to say yes to the things that are really important to you, and you can show up and you can do that well. And I think that is the balance. The balance is learn to say no and really learn to say out loud, I am not doing that because I need to look after myself. That is too much for me to handle. That is too stressful for me. And I'm going to go and seek the help that I need. And yet people may call you names. They may say you're being selfish, but you can say, no, actually, that is self-preservation. And in the great words of Audre Lorde, caring for myself is not self-indulgent. It is self-preservation. And that is an act of political warfare. And it brings me to a quote that a friend and psychologist said during an interview that I was doing. If you don't look after yourself emotionally, you are succumbing to white supremacy, because that's exactly where they want us to be. From the days of slavery to leaving Mike Brown's body in the sweltering heat for 4 hours for all to see, to having a knee on George Floyd's neck, all of that is telling us that we are not worthy of anything. And by the way, you're not allowed to express emotion, and you're not allowed to have any feelings. And we don't experience pain. There's another myth. And all of that says that we just got to put on with it and move on. Those days are over. Those days are seriously over. We have emotions, we experience pain, we need to speak up, we need to seek help, and we need to get what we need to be our full selves emotionally. Because whilst we can address the housing and the economics and the education, if we are not right here and we are not emotionally well, all of that doesn't matter, because we'll still have a meltdown and they're still controlling our minds. So we've got to control our own minds, look after ourselves, and at every opportunity when it comes too much, we just got to speak up. It's not being vulnerable, it's not being selfish, it's called self-preservation.
Yes. And you mentioned the year of no, saying no to the things that don't serve you so that you can say yes to the things that do. And one of the things that you said yes to was being a featured speaker in the Leadership by Any Means Necessary conference. You're actually one of the speakers that's going to open up the conference during the opening plenary session. What are you hoping to bring to that session, and what do you hope that people get out of it?
Yeah, I was super excited to be part of that session, just to open up the plenary session. I just introduce the conference for the participants, and I have the pleasure of interviewing Ernest and Marcus Soid, who's the Executive Director of the African American Leadership Forum, together with Lakora, who's one of the program managers there, and just really set the stage for what the next 2 days will bring virtually via this leadership conference, and what leadership means to the leadership team in the African American Leadership Forum, the programs they've created to develop and support leaders in the community, together with providing information. And I think what's really key about the conference and what we talk about in a plenary session is really co-creating solutions together, because we all know what the issues are. We know that, right? We're sick of hearing about the issues, but we want to create solutions together, and we want to do it for us. So it's for us, by us, this Black-centric approach that Lakora created, which is phenomenal, putting Black people at the center. And so during that plenary session, we talk about that together with leadership personas, which Alf created, and they're the thought leaders, the influencer, the builder, and the ambassador. So essentially, we set the stage, we hopefully get everybody excited and encourage people to stay for the next 2 days and get seriously engaged in a conference, roll their sleeves up, and be prepared to do some work and leave there knowing that they have a call to action and they too can make a difference in their community, in our community. So that's yeah.
Yes, we're certainly looking forward to that session. And another plenary session that I'm really looking forward to is the education plenary, which Dr. Hughes is actually going to be facilitating with Dr. Uhuru Williams. So Dr. Hughes, tell us about the education plenary session at the upcoming Leadership by Any Means Necessary conference. What are you looking forward to, and what are you hoping that people get from that session?
So I'm really looking forward to the discussion. Dr. Uhuru and I kind of laughed because we said we can't believe that we have never crossed paths until now. Him being at St. Thomas and then myself being with one of the Minnesota State College and Universities institutions. So really looking at aspirational education leadership. We know that there are huge disparities. We don't want to revisit what the disparities are, but hearing about resources, whether you are a parent, whether you are an educator, whether you are a staff person, but being able to come to the education session and really get some nuggets of wisdom and hear and have your questions be answered as well, because I really will be facilitating, kind of an interactive discussion with Dr. Williams and myself, but then also looking at how do we create positive change out of education. We hear such negative connotations around education, more particularly around the disparities and the education gap, the opportunity gap, the achievement gap that exists. And so this is an opportunity to get new information, new insight. Again, I'm kind of still what Sylvia said, by us, for us. So I'm looking forward to people coming and hearing what we have to say.
Well, we're looking forward to it as well. And I'm surprised that the two of you haven't crossed paths, but that's, leadership by any means necessary. And the power of this conference is that there are so many talented people that are on this lineup. You can do the full list of speakers on the ALF website, which is also where you can register. It is not too late. But it's really just a magical time for Black leaders to come together and to share their areas of expertise. And although this is a virtual conference, what I love is that it's not a one-dimensional, we're talking at you and you just sit at your screen and get talked at for 3 days. It's interactive, and I've been working on the tech side to make sure that people will have an opportunity to network, not just with the speakers, but with each other as well. So if you're also looking for an opportunity to connect with like-minded people and people from your particular field, or to maybe have some cross-sector collaborations in the future, this is a great virtual space for you to be in. And if you follow the marquee scrolling at the bottom, that's the website in which you can purchase tickets. Speaking of the conference, Angela, you're not doing a plenary session, but you're actually doing a breakout session on the value of civic engagement. So what can people expect from what you're bringing to your session?
So for my session, I think one of the things that people can expect is kind of a breakdown of how to utilize your power through civic engagement, particularly in this moment. So, we're in a space where we've just had a presidential election, right? We've had a major shakeup when it comes to, the parties that control our Senate and then also the White House. And so how we can stay engaged, particularly in this moment through civic engagement, and continue to apply the pressure when it comes to the Black agenda or the community's agenda, when it comes to what the things that community members are fighting for and the needs that we have. So, particularly right now, I want to remind people that we create, okay, the conversation. We can push a conversation on the national level about, the things that are important to us. So if we are talking about the want for more economic opportunities in our communities, particularly for like Black owned businesses, that is something that we need to start pushing. And there's a number of avenues that we can do that on, right? But it's really getting down to the level of what an individual, what you can do to keep on pushing the Black agenda or Black centered policy recommendations in our government. So there are ways, like I mentioned earlier, that a regular citizen can engage with our government and our system to create new policies and to be a part of that conversation. It is time now more than ever that everyone is all hands on deck to keep pushing these conversations and centering the focus of these conversations on things that will really, actually impact and actually help our communities going forward.
I love it. Well, I plan on attending that session because I have some things I need to know. It was just announced today that Biden is not signing on to the Democrat suggestion to have the $50,000 student loan forgiveness. And I was looking forward to that. So I'm going to be in your session so I can learn how to hold Biden and VP Harris accountable, because I feel like we need a little bit of student loan forgiveness right now. At least that's how I'm feeling. I don't know. But there's plenty of other ways in which people can engage and really tap into their power. Again, whether it's grassroots organizing, corporate leadership, working in a nonprofit or community entity, or entrepreneurship. There is something for everyone at this conference. I want to ask Mr. Ernest Comer, who has done a lot of work behind the scenes to bring this concept into fruition. What else are you looking forward to as it relates to the Leadership by Any Means Necessary conference?
Oh man, there's so many pieces to it. One of the things that we honed in on as we talked about what we wanted to happen at this conference was the different focus areas that the Leadership Forum has sort of leaned into. So we have education, we have economic opportunity, we have health and wellness, and we have family and culture. And in most of these areas, we get a fair amount of engagement from community on creating different initiatives. When we lean into our collective impact work and we invite people into the Josie R. Johnson Leadership Academy, folks are pretty clear on sort of where they dive into the work that needs to happen in community, except for that family and culture space. It's one of the challenges that we've continued to have year over year. How do we help folks understand what work needs to happen in that space and how to get engaged with it and really create energy around it? And so I really sort of sat with myself around how do we create some energy in the context of family and culture and get folks diving into how to make an impact and get folks thinking about what impact is needed in that space. And so what I decided to do was basically create space specifically around family and culture, where we invite a national speaker to talk about their perspective and their experience in that specific space. So we reached out to Dr. Eric Thomas, E.T., the hip hop preacher, one of the top motivational speakers in the world, and actually invited him to speak at this conference. And I mean, the power, the energy, the fervor that he brings to the conversation is incredible. But not only did we invite him, we invited him and his son to have a conversation, because we're talking about family and culture anyway. It's not necessarily about who he is as an individual, but who he is, not only in business, but in the context of family. And what does it mean to be someone who operates at this level of leadership and who, you know, leads not only for the community and the people that are impacted by the content that he creates, but also how do you lead in your household? How do you create the type of experience for the people that are impacted by your work, but also care for the people that are in your household? And this was one of those things that, you know, I followed ET for, you know, a significant portion of my career. And you know, as I was coming up in the work that I do, really being just motivated by the content that he created. And I've always heard him mention different things about his family throughout the years of just watching videos and et cetera. And it just sort of dawned on me that he might be somebody who could help us in our community understand the value of caring for and calling attention to the needs in the space of family and culture for our community. So I'm just sort of overjoyed with the fact that he was willing to create the time and take the energy to contribute to this space, and just super excited for our community to get the opportunity to hear from him and his son about, you know, their perspectives on family and culture and his approach to leadership in his household and the work that he does. So that's one of the really big things. But at the end of the day, I feel like this was an opportunity. Creating the Leadership by Any Means conference for me was an opportunity to really set the table for giants. And so I looked around the community for pioneers and torchbearers, and that's who we invited into this space. And I made an effort to sort of set a little space for myself so that I could be a part of the conversation. But I like the entire lineup of this conference is incredible, and I can't even describe how excited I am about what is to come. So we're gonna see.
Well, I am incredibly excited as well. Because I'm on the team, I've gotten to see small little previews of some of the sessions that were pre-recorded, and to see some of the scripts that some of the talent have prepared. And I've also gotten a little preview into some of the performances. So again, this is Leadership by Any Means Necessary, the virtual conference by the African American Leadership Forum. And it wouldn't be a complete conference without the arts and culture incorporation. And so there are going to be some phenomenal performances from Ujama Music Group. DJ Diggy is going to be on the ones and twos spinning. We've got some hometown talent, MPLS, in the building, giving you that live band feel. We've got Thomasina Petrus and Walter Chancellor Jr. giving you a little bit of jazz. So there's literally hip hop and rock and roll and funk and all of the things. And in addition to just quality thought leadership, networking opportunities, and an opportunity for true engagement, community building, and professional development. The link is again scrolling down below. It's the Leadership by Any Means Necessary conference. Now, before we wrap up, I want to touch on something and just ask all of our panelists before we get out of here. Ernest, you brought up something which I think is incredibly important. And it probably was intentional, but I'm just going to go ahead and name it. You talk about E.T., the hip hop preacher, who, by the way, Google him, YouTube him if you're not familiar with his work. Incredibly inspiring. If I'm not feeling great in the morning and I need some motivation and I need somebody to yell at me and say, stop feeling sorry for yourself and get to it because something greater is on the other side, for real, I'll go put on some E.T. He is phenomenal. This is national talent as well as local talent that's coming in to really give you guys a treat. So please don't miss out. Do yourself a favor. Even if you can't make it to every session, make sure that you register and you get an opportunity. But you said not only is E.T. going to be there, but his son. And because I've gone to the ALF website and I've seen the full lineup, and because I'm a part of the team, I happen to know that this is not the only father and son duo that's going to be a part of this conference. For me, why I feel like that is incredibly important in this time is because I see us as a community thriving in spite of all that we're going through. I am a part of a sorority. As you know, you're my frat brother. Your wife is a part of my sorority. She's my soror. So I'm all about women's empowerment. I run an organization and an initiative for Black moms. I'm all about womanhood and women's empowerment and sisterhood. And those things are incredibly important. And I don't apologize for taking up space for us. And also, what I have observed within our community is that uh, we go hard in times of adversity, like when a member of our community is killed, especially at the hands of law enforcement. So, like what we just saw with our brother George Floyd. I have watched our community rally to honor this man and many other men, especially who have been harmed. Uh, but I don't see as much work being done, and this is just my perspective, to make sure that we're uplifting the brothers that are still here. And I think it's incredibly important that we do so. We can hold space. It doesn't have to be an either or. It should not be an either or because we're one family, we're one community. It's a both and. And so I really appreciate with this conference that there is space for leaders for all walks of life to be highlighted, but that we give a platform to the Black man and his son. You know, that actually deeply, deeply matters to me, is important to me, because what you guys can't see behind these laptops is my two annoying brothers making sandwiches in the kitchen, you know? And so when I'm doing this work and when I see something happen as horrific as what happened to Brother Floyd, I see my dad, I see my brothers, I see my cousins and my family and my community members. And I want to make sure that in our work, because the sisters are doing their thing. I mean, we're just phenomenal, you know, but I want to make sure naturally, you know, I want to make sure that we don't leave our brothers behind and that we are mindful about the way in which we do our work in this moment and in this movement. Here in the Twin Cities, we were dramatically impacted by what happened to Brother Floyd and the uprising that followed after that. And we're getting ready to come up on the trial for the officers who were involved in George Floyd's murder. And so we've already been getting notices that things in the Twin Cities could shift again. Things around the country could shift as it relates to public safety, as it relates to just social unrest. It could turn up, it could really go down, and it could be crazy. And I happen to be working with our sister Angela in the NAACP when George Floyd was killed. And I know how crazy it was to be a leader in that moment. Angela was doing interviews around the clock with news outlets from all over the world, literally. We were all working around the clock and also grieving simultaneously. And it is very likely that those same feelings of active overdrive as well as grief could come forward again very soon, as the trial is just a few weeks away. My final question to all of you panelists is, what advice do you have for Black people, especially those within the Twin Cities or wherever we are, who are trying to lead through this pandemic, through their personal struggles, who are trying to lead through the residual trauma of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Jamar Clark, and so many more? We go through things, and unfortunately, because of the world that we live in and the history of this country, sometimes we get re-triggered. Sometimes we get re-traumatized. When we're minding our own business, something happens, right? And so as we sign off, I want to ask you all, what advice do you have to encourage our community and our viewers to truly lead by any means necessary, even as we come up on what could be really challenging times? And Dr. Bartley, I will start with you.
Thank you. Very, very good question again, and a very difficult question. And as you said, we're living through these unprecedented times, and I would never have imagined that in my lifetime or the lifetime of my children, we would be living through what we went through in 2020 with the systemic racism bubbling up as it did, and the pandemic that we're still living through. So the first thing I would say is to look back on our history and our ancestors. Knowing your history is really important because we are from such strong kings and queens, and we are here because of their fight, and they went through the unimaginable. Even though we are going through the unconscionable right now, they went through the unimaginable, and they did that because they wanted their descendants to be where we are today, and as we want our descendants to live a better life than we're living now, and basically to eliminate this systemic racism. So when I feel hopeless, and it was tough last year, there was many times I felt very hopeless, and that there was just no racial justice in this world. I would look back on history. History tells us that we can make it through. And then I look back on what our ancestors did to make it through, and they had community. They mobilized, they looked after each other, they had each other's back, and they controlled what they can control. And I think that is a key in getting through a pandemic and living through what we are with this racial injustice and uprising. What is it that we can control? And we can control how we respond to what's going on out there. We can control what social media we take in, if it's driving us crazy and really bringing us to a dark place emotionally. We can, we can reduce the social media. We can go out there and do work. There's many ways to skin a cat. It can be grassroots work, like Angela's. She's a phenomenal leader at the NAACP. So impressed by her and many others in the Twin Cities. It can be more at the strategic level. It can be at the policy level. I'm not saying the NAACP are not strategic. They're very strategic, but they're grassroots. You can be at the political level. You can work from within corporations. There's many ways in which you can help. And so know your skill set, know what you can do, and give back to our community to make a difference for the better, and just basically control what you can control. And then lastly, amongst all of it, just be safe and be careful, right? We are living through a pandemic. Make sure we still adhere to those guidelines. The last thing we want, if something does go down in 2 weeks' time, is for people to get sick with COVID-19 on top of everything else. So we need to look after our community. We need to continue to go out there and provide education on these preventative measures. And we just need to be safe. So I think my key message is control what you can control and give back to your community, and recognize the shoulders of which we stand, which are exceptionally strong shoulders, and they did it for us. And so we too can persevere while looking after our emotional and physical health.
Thank you. Very well said. Dr. Hughes, I'll ask you next. What advice do you have for our community to lead by any means necessary, especially in the upcoming weeks?
Well, and I know, unfortunately, there's several of us that are, dreading that this day is coming forward. And Dr. Bartley said it best. This brings up relived trauma, historical trauma, but even, reliving triggers that will cause you to come up out of yourself. And what I mean by that is having kind of this out of body experience. I think now is the time to put differences aside. Now is the time to also come together as holistically. You cannot lead in a vacuum. And so I would also say, seek the help that you need, because if you already know that you're anticipating that this is going to relive some drama for you, or trauma rather for you, then seek out that expertise now. Go get a therapist, or talk to people, or commune together, either with your family, talk about it, and name it. I think what happens is we speak so high level and we don't name what that trauma is, or we don't name what that trigger is. And I think that's the time to do it. Wherever you are in leadership, and depending upon your organization, can you lead collectively? Can you bring others along with you and provide them an opportunity to seek to understand, then to be understood? And I think that is so important as we, come up on a relived trauma again for our community, and hoping for a successful outcome. But we know what the outcome ends up being, and I'm really hoping that we don't have the same outcome with this, scenario that we're coming up on with George Floyd's murder. But I would say, if anything, making sure that you are coming together as a people. Be mindful of your emotions. and don't lead in a vacuum, because each one needs one and each one can teach one. And I think now is the time for us to really collectively show how powerful we are as a people.
Absolutely. I'll pivot next to Miss Angela Rose Myers. Angela, what advice do you have for us on how we move forward in the coming weeks?
So I think definitely in the coming weeks, be mindful of the spaces you occupy and are invited to. And, you know, really ask yourself if the spaces that you are in align with your values, and also, you know, do they align with your goals? Or are you being there really aligns with the outcomes and the goals that you want to see for our future and our community? And I give you permission to excuse yourself from those spaces that don't fuel you, that don't energize you, that don't feel safe for you in these coming months and weeks. I mean, right now we're going to expect this trial is going to take a while. We're going to need stamina, right? And leadership can feel lonely. Being a community advocate, a community organizer, a community activist can feel lonely at times, but remember to seek out those spaces that fuel you. For me, that's, you know, Black tables, Black spaces, wherever Black people are organizing, I want to be there. You know, like that's what really energizes me, as a relationship that I have with with Black organizers and with the Black community. And so for you, you need to find and figure out what those spaces will look like, because once we go into this time period where there might be, you know, shifting tides, right? You need to have people alongside you that and have demonstrated the same values and the same want of goals that you have for your community and for yourself. And, you know, lastly, I would say, as we're organizing, as there's so many people who want to get involved right now, think about the method of community organizing that you want to activate in. You know, it's not always like the NAACP, right? We're an advocacy organization. We're very much grassroots in the sense of we are community members, right, who are volunteering to do this policy advocacy work. And so, one of the things and community organizing work. And so one of the things that is important for us is that we are beholden to our community, that we are talking to community members about policy and about politics that are important to them, right? That's not for everybody. There are things like direct service that we saw even this summer when the grocery stores were closed. You saw so many people who are organizing, to get food to people who need it, right? That is a place where, maybe your organization, maybe your friends and family can impact and activate in. There's a lot of ways and methods to organize our community. And it doesn't always have to be, that direct service. It doesn't always have to be protesting. It doesn't always have to be, advocating at a policy level. It can be, doing community education on these issues and keeping people updated with the right information, not misinformation, but the right information that you can find. ALF will be doing some things around, putting out updates. The city of Minneapolis will be doing things to put out updates. Like really, really do that work to think about what method that you want to organize in. And then once you're doing that, make sure that the people around you and the spaces that you find yourself align with that goal and your goals and your values.
Yes, I love what you said about the different ways in which you can show up and lead in those moments. I know so many people felt compelled to be on the front lines and to be out protesting. And then there were others that couldn't, or that just did not want to for whatever reason. And I do think it's important to name that leadership by any means necessary. And so what may work for someone else doesn't work for you, and you should give yourself grace and knowing that the way in which you show up is exactly what the community needs for you to do. I want to close with our brother Ernest Comer. Ernest, what advice do you have, and any final words as it relates to the conference?
Yeah, I would say that being the most authentic version of yourself, being the truest version of yourself, is something that can not only like save your life, but will also be the greatest contribution that you can make to the people around you and to the community that you serve. When you come as your true self and you contribute things that are authentic to who you are, then those contributions are that much more powerful, that they resonate that much greater, and they can have that much more impact. So it's just be who you are and contribute what you will in that frame. So that's where you can have the greatest impact. That's where you can do the greatest good. And the community and the world will appreciate you more for it. This conference, I think, is just a massive opportunity for folks in our community to connect with one another, to gain some insight, some wisdom that's going to be shared, and to hear some really powerful stories that can inspire. My greatest hope is that beyond what you learn, that this is more of a call to lead. So many of us fail to see ourselves as leaders. We struggle to see ourselves as peers to the people who we revere in leadership, right? And so we have this grandiose view of folks who step into leadership roles, and we are doing incredible things in community through these people, and it's certainly understandable, and we can appreciate all the work that these folks do. And we have to recognize that we are all human. We all have the same 24 hours to contribute to the work that needs to happen. And it is our own responsibility to be able to see ourselves in the reflection of what leaders look like in community. So I hope that folks take away that experience from this conference, and I hope that you bring your full selves to the work that we do.
I love it. And we definitely do hope that you bring your full self into every space, but especially into the virtual space. The Leadership by Any Means Necessary conference is happening February 25th through the 27th. Tickets are now on sale at alftc.org. Make sure you get those. Before we wrap up, I want to give a very special thank you to our sponsors, the Minneapolis Foundation, North Point Health and Wellness, 3M, US Bank, Target, and Children's Minnesota for making this town hall possible, and especially to our partner organizations, North Point Health and Wellness, Children's Minnesota, Insight News, the Minnesota Spokesman Recorder, and Minnesota Community Care. Make sure you join us next week, February 24th. We're going back to back, and we're doing a very special town hall. Again, this one in partnership with Children's Minnesota, and it's called Black Men in White Coats. So we're covering who are the professionals, the Black men in our community that we can highlight and show love to, who are doing work in the medical field to help combat this pandemic. It's going to be a really interesting conversation focused on the Boule and Black Greek life and leadership, again, by any means necessary, because it looks so many ways. However it looks for you, we hope that you do so in a way that is nurturing to your mind, body, soul, and spirit, and that you do what you need to do to take care of yourself. My name is Brittany L. Wright with Insight News. Please be good to yourself and be good to the people around you, and we'll see you next time. Take care.